Hello and welcome to Tales from the Doghouse, Separation Anxiety Explained. I am Ness Jones in Australia from Separation Anxiety in Dogs Decoded, and with me today is...
I am Stacey Bell with Focused Fun in the US. Today, for Mental Health Awareness Month this May, we have a very special guest, Eva Maron, and she's joining us to kind of help us address the mental health issues surrounding having a dog with separation anxiety, because we all do know that impacts our mental health. So, by talking about it, we really hope to fight the stigma a little bit if there are still people feeling that way, which I think there are, provide support to those of you who are struggling and try to educate those who are not struggling. So, Eva, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Before you do that, Eva, perhaps we could just mention Stacey's connectivity issues. Poor Stacey is having a little bit of technical Wi-Fi connectivity issues. So she keeps jamming a little bit, but so please be patient, bear with us. We'll do the best we can. But we thought we'd better mention that at the start of the show, especially if anybody's watching on YouTube, because it keeps buzzing and the sound isn't quite syncing with the video. Like now.
All right. Yes. Hello. Thank you. I really appreciate both of you having me. I think this is great. So a little about me. I am a social worker. So I've been in the mental health field doing therapy, for 17 years. Like hurts to say that out loud. Through just kind of all various different populations and groups. Currently, I provide mental health counseling all virtually, so all through Zoom, to people kind of all over the United States with a variety of mental health struggles, depression, anxiety, trauma, all sorts of things. And, mostly it's kind of adults. And yeah, it's really great. I love doing the virtual therapy. It was not something that I thought would ever work. Mm-hmm. And then COVID happened and it was forced. And then I decided I would never go back. So.
Right. So tell us about your specific situation, because I think our listeners will be really, really interested in that. And because I think it puts you in a really good position to really empathize and support folks struggling with a dog with really any behavioral struggle, but separation anxiety.
Yeah. So I look down because he's over there. I have two dogs. I have one with separation anxiety. He also has a lot of other anxiety and behavior related struggles. We actually discovered his separation anxiety when he started showing some aggression towards our other dog. And we tried to separate them and kind of rotate dogs, and discovered that he was screaming when he was in another room away from us. And worked through multiple trainers, had some negative experiences with some trainers, had some more positive experiences, and now, we've got him, we've seen a veterinary behaviorist, work with a trainer specifically she kind of specializes in reintroducing dogs that have fought. And so she kind of helps us with that. We have he also has some reactivity to people and all the things, noise sensitivity, everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do think that when there are, more than one behavioral struggle going on, like, dog to dog interactions, reactivity, stranger danger, separation anxiety, and perhaps some health complications as well, it does make it, it does make it a lot more difficult to work through the case, just because there are so many factors to account for. So you have definitely been through it with Finn. Tell us how your partner kind of fits into the whole picture.
So right now, and I think in a lot of ways we're pretty lucky. I cannot imagine doing what we do if I was a single person by myself. I don't know. We're fairly lucky in that we can kind of divide and conquer. And so she spends a lot of time with our other dog, mostly because he's very hyper attached to me. And so we will switch sometimes, but he doesn't do well with that for super long. And we've definitely had some struggles with, kind of being on the same page about things, and what to do and how to handle things. I think as time has gone on, we have kind of gotten more on the same page and kind of more, I think at this point I've done so much research and we've worked with so many people, and that, it's kind of routine now, I guess, to manage things in a certain way and deal with them. And I think that's made it easier just because it's more normal. At first, when it's this huge change of, okay, we have to separate these dogs, plus he can't be left alone, suddenly our whole lives are different. I think people react to that differently. And I think, we definitely reacted to it differently. But I think, as time went on, it became easier for both of us to kind of handle it and deal with it. I still do most of he's with me all the time. We do a lot of training. So, we try to be on the same page as much as possible.
Yeah. And so I know that you have worked with some pet parent dog teams that have had some separation anxiety issues before. What do you think the most common struggles or difficult parts or obstacles that people experience?
I think the biggest thing with, maybe the probably few biggest things, are people feeling really isolated. Both kind of practically, because they're recognizing they can't leave their dog alone, which means now all of a sudden they can't go do the things they normally do. They can't spend as much time with friends or family or, work even. I think it's interesting because I think that happened to a lot of people with COVID anyway. People got very isolated. We all started working from home. And so I think that then compounds for a lot of people with, oh, okay, the world went back to normal and they're all going out and I still can't.
Right.
I think a lot of people feel, which I think adds to the isolation, that others don't get it.
There's almost like not a stigma, but it feels like a criticism. Almost feels like victim blaming.
Yeah, it very much is. I think people hear a lot of, oh, you just baby your dog. You're not if you were my favorite, my absolute favorite,
spoiling it.
if you just, it's because you're anxious. If you just stopped being so anxious, they would say, oh, okay, well, let me just, magically stop being anxious. If only I had known. I think, yeah, there's a lot of spoiling, you're spoiling the dog. I think there's a lot. What's the thing that I've heard a lot, and I heard a lot was, oh, well, it's all on how you raise them, right?
Yeah.
Never mind that, this is the fourth dog I've had and the only one who's ever had any kind of issues with anything, but it's all on how you raise them, right? And so,
right.
All of these things.
Did you get the it's just a dog? Like,
oh yeah, it's just
you're pathetic. Like, it's just a dog.
You have to live, but you have to live your life, right? And so, on top of already feeling isolated, people are feeling judged. People are feeling like others don't understand. They're feeling like maybe they are crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe this is really my fault, and which then just makes you feel even more isolated.
Yeah.
I'm the only person. Nobody gets it.
I had a discovery call with a lady once, and broke my heart. She was in floods of tears, and basically she recognized that she couldn't leave her dog. She didn't want to leave it to panic, and her family would be having social gatherings, and they wouldn't let her bring the dog, and she couldn't find cover for it, so she wouldn't go. And then they were turning around saying, "You valued the dog over us. The dog's more important to you than we are." And it really,
why is your dog more important to you than me?
Yeah, it really destroyed the relationship with her family, and she was on the Zoom call with me crying her heart out. I felt dreadful for her. It's hard to navigate all that stuff, like the judgment, I think, as you say. And
and I think it can become kind of on both sides. I think you can end up with not wanting to be around those people because you don't feel supported and understood. And realistically, if you say no to every invite, eventually people stop inviting you.
Yeah.
And so you kind of lose, I don't want to say you lose relationships, but I think that's a possibility for some people. And that, can be difficult. One, because nobody likes to feel rejected, of course. And maybe you start questioning, oh, wow, there's this person in my life that I thought loved me and cared about me. And now what I'm getting is judgment and negativity and anger, and not support and understanding and validation, which is what I need. And so I think relationships can really suffer.
I think the relationships are a big piece. Do you have tips for our listeners on how to navigate kind of those scripts of, it's either blaming or just not understanding the training process? So maybe they're saying, oh, just leave your dog, it's no problem, or whatever.
They're never going to learn to be okay with it if you never leave them alone.
Yeah. So to help pet parents that have a dog with separation related behaviors feel more supported, understood, validated, are there maybe scripts or talking points that you could recommend to help facilitate that?
Yeah, and I think it depends on kind of what you're hearing, right? So I know for me, I have a very good friend who is in most areas very supportive and understanding, and can be wonderful, and was repeatedly kind of giving me that type of advice, right? Oh, you just have to if you never leave him, he's never going to learn, and tough love and all of these things. And finally one day I just kind of, and I made it a joke. Like we, I said it in kind of a teasing, joking way, but I kind of went, well, yeah, I'm definitely going to I'm going to ignore the advice that I'm getting from the people who are professionals that I pay to tell me what to do with my dog, and do that instead. And she kind of went, no, you're probably not going to do that, are you? and it really did stop after that. Like, she was like, right, you're paying. Okay.
I always say to people, if they say, I'm not a dog trainer, but you need to do X, Y, Z, just get to that first, I'm not a dog trainer, but, and don't listen to anything else.
Right. And then, and I've had other people who have given me advice and had these conversations, and I literally will sometimes just smile and nod. Knowing in my head, I'm throwing everything you're saying out, and it doesn't matter. Right. And I think that for a lot of people, that's ultimately kind of where you have to go, is you have to say, is this relationship important enough to me that I'm going to choose not to debate this? And then depending on the relationship, you can even set that boundary and say, I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
Just know that if I'm going to come to your event, or we're going to go out and do something, just treat it like I've got, an infant at home, and you need to give me enough notice to find a sitter. And I'm not asking you to understand why or agree with why. That's how it is. And so, give me enough notice. I'd love to come. I'll find a sitter, and I don't want to talk about it. And it's okay to say things.
Yeah. I do think with a lot of people, just drawing that boundary and, agree that there are differences in your perspectives is a good way to do it. But when it's your partner, that can be really tricky, right?
Because that becomes different, doesn't it?
It does. It makes all the difference. So are there, specific pointers for our listeners surrounding that type of relationship? Because I know a lot of tension can arise in those kinds of circumstances.
I think unfortunately, sometimes you kind of have to, I hate the term pick your battles, but I think that it kind of fits, right? So, okay, you think that this whole don't leave the dog home alone, do this gradual desensitization training, you think all this is ridiculous. And I also, and I'm thinking about Finn with all of his things, but, I think a lot of people deal with that. I'm also asking you to change this and this and this and this and this. Are there some of those things maybe I can be a little bit more flexible on, if you will give me the space and the time to try this and see that it helps. And I think for a lot of people, seeing the improvement is enough to convince them. And sometimes it also becomes like, okay, well, this is how I'm choosing to deal with this. And, and for example, with my partner, I tend to be the one that stays home. Again, mostly because he's pretty hyper attached to me, but also because I already work from home. It's just kind of easier. And so, okay, well, I'm not asking you to never leave the house. I'm just asking you to understand that I'm probably not coming with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another thing that I think can be helpful in the situations where the way the training is being carried out is kind of the rub. If you can maybe explain to your partner, this is what the research shows is the most likely way to help our dog. And I know that you might not agree with it, but if you could just let me try, like you said, let me try. I would love for you to support me in this way. So it's less about the training and the dog and more about your partner supporting you.
Right.
I think that can sometimes kind of shift the perspective or the narrative a little bit in a way that maybe the partner is more likely to show support.
And then there's always bribery as well. I'm going to cook you your favorite meal every single night of the week. You want to spend $200 on that hamburger? Off you
go for it. Yep. Yeah. And I think, that can be a shift too in saying, I understand that you think whatever it is that we should just leave the dog to cry it out and they'll get over it or whatever. But doing that, knowing my dog's going to be home suffering is going to cause me so much anxiety that I'm not going to enjoy whatever we're doing.
Right.
And so whether you agree with the method for the dog or not following that, I need to follow it because that's also going to help me.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think sometimes people can shift that a little bit into feeling, good about, okay, I need to do this because otherwise my partner's suffering as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's always that element of, yes, I respect your thinking because, not everybody is brought up the same way about how they should feel about dogs. And appreciating that, respecting that, but then saying, but this is where I am. So we need to figure it out.
Yeah. And I know, we joked at one point that we had a trainer that we worked with for a while. And we used to joke that at some point, like our sessions with her were more like couples counseling than they were dog training. And I think that to some extent was actually true because it was this kind of third person who could explain, well, here is the research. Here's why we want to do it this way. Why don't you want to do it that way? What are the obstacles for you?
Yeah. And I do think, we are not counselors, but we can help people navigate. I think just being kind of a third party, we can help navigate, ask questions, just to help people think through things a little bit differently, maybe. But yeah, that is,
and sometimes just the third party, right? I can say something 1,000 times.
Yeah.
But when someone else says it now, suddenly it has different meaning. And I think, that sometimes can be really helpful.
What would you say to someone about if they're doing the training, because I guess we come across, and you mentioned it earlier, you touched on it about, the dog guardian having anxiety and they're so invested in the training that they can't, sometimes it's even a case of their dog does a yawn and they're like, oh my God, I've got to rush back inside. They get too caught up in it, too anxious about it. And of course, when they're walking out the door, when they're anxious, that's not going to help their dog either. How do people overcome that anxiety? I've actually just talking about couples too. I've got a client couple and he's very invested in the training, but he's more, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. She said, do this. Don't worry, it's going to be fine. Whereas she's like, but what if this? What if this? What if this? And I think that's quite a common thread is pretty hard to overcome. So what would you say to those people that are struggling with that?
I think there's a few things. I think some of it can be, and of course I, am a therapist. And so I always encourage, and I will be open and say that one of the very first things that I did when we started struggling as much as we have, is I went and found my own therapist. I went, okay, my own anxiety is going through the roof with this too. And, I need to be able to deal with that. I have to take care of myself or I can't do anything. And, I think if we're willing to come to a professional and ask for help for our dog, doing that for ourselves should also be acceptable.
And recommended. I mean, I do have clients where especially if they don't have a support system, will, try to gently recommend that they get a counselor, a therapist, or somebody to talk to help them navigate this and do that self-care and learn strategies to help them cope with their anxiety or frustration or stress or whatever they're feeling.
Absolutely. And I think it, ultimately it also kind of, there's those in the moment things you can do when you're feeling anxious. I always tell people, and again, it's almost a joke, but, go on YouTube and type in, relaxation, guided meditation. There are 4 million videos that range from 5 minutes long to 5 hours long of all sorts of things that can help you in the moment kind of reduce that anxiety. I also think that we're doing gradual desensitization with our dogs. Well, we're kind of doing it with ourselves too. The more times that I walk out that door and I see that my dog is okay, the less anxious I am about it the next time. Especially if, we are seeing like, oh, okay, they're getting better. And, oh, look, I think one of the best things that happened weirdly, because it seems in the moment I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. I was, doing some training with Finn and a neighbor decided to start mowing their lawn. Which, I'm standing outside of my house going, go back in your like, stop. And of course he heard them and he got up and he looked out the window and he started barking. And I went, hold on a second. He would do this if I was in the room. This behavior is no different. He would bark at those people mowing their lawn if I was sitting right next to him. I want to see what he does. I'm going to see if he can settle himself down. And he did. He kind of watched him and he barked and he growled and then he left the window and he went and he laid back down on his bed. And now, of course, if it had gone on for an extent, I would have come back in, but it was like, knowing and seeing that behavior change, right? Where he was able to kind of calm down. I was like, oh, and the anxiety that built up when I saw my neighbor come out and start mowing their lawn. And then the level of like relief when I was like, oh, look, he laid back down and he's fine. Those kinds of experiences, right? One time I got caught, a neighbor neighbors are always a problem, right? Decided to start up a conversation with me. And we actually went beyond kind of our target duration because I could not, trying to run away and couldn't do it. And again, he did okay. And so, every moment, just like for them, every experience where we see them do okay, we start to feel a little bit better and a little less anxious. It's the same. I always joke that we're really not that different from our
we aren't
dogs. The same things work on us
Mhm.
Gradual exposure and all of those learning relaxation, all of that stuff helps us just as much. So,
Yep. So, this might not really be an area of specialty. So if it's not, just,
okay.
feel free to not answer. But, we talk sometimes on this show about, how having a dog with a behavioral struggle can negatively impact your relationship with your dog. And, we've given tips on that. But, can you give our listeners some tips on what are some ways that we can try to repair the relationship with the maybe not everybody, maybe some people you're happy to let go of, but people who you have a damaged relationship with as a result of what's going on with your dog.
Yeah.
Do you have maybe some tips or strategies for our listeners about how to kind of make some effort there to alleviate the damage done?
I think, again, in a way it's very similar. The more positive experiences we have with the person, the better we feel about them. And so I think it really kind of goes both ways, right? If you've have this damaged relationship because you have felt judged or not supported, sometimes the repair has to come from saying, like, hey, I feel I felt judged. I felt I need support. Here's how you could support me. I think the other thing that we can do is, find ways to connect with people. So, and of course, again, it depends on your situation, right? So, I have some friends that he knows, he loves them. They can come over. And so we started inviting, okay, well, we can't go out, but can you come over? And just making sure that we had those connections and still made the effort, maybe in a different way, but still kind of finding ways to make that effort to stay connected. And kind of building a connection on other things.
Right.
What about
friends that we don't know, who don't know him, who cannot come over, who, he would, they could, right? We could introduce them. That we have a whole process, but, but, okay, well, I can't really invite you over, but what if, I'm going to, again, put in the effort to find a sitter and still go out to dinner or do whatever. And make sure that even if we don't see eye to eye on some of this, that we're still having experiences together and spending time and connecting on other things.
What about
and laughing?
Yeah. What about with the dog though? So some people can end up resenting their own dog because they're that happy, that life they thought about skipping off into the sunset with their new dog is completely different to what they were expecting. So that can have a breakdown in relationship with the dog. So what would you suggest for people that maybe they might resent their dog, but then they feel guilty for resenting their dog, and it's this horrible,
Yep. So, one of my, and I'll tell you a little bit, when I first started out doing therapy, I worked in a program that was for teenagers who were struggling with self-injury, suicidal ideation, lots of really, kind of heavy stuff. And this program involved, there was a group where we taught skills, and then there was individual therapy, and the families were very involved. The parents came to the skills group with their teenager, and so everybody learned these skills together. It's an amazing program. And so, I think about one of the things we saw a lot in that program was that would sometimes happen with parents and their kids too, right? They've got this kid who's really struggling, and they're starting to feel very frustrated, and they're blaming themselves. What did I do wrong? And there's resentment, there's guilt, there's all of this stuff, right? And one of the skills that we taught in this group helped a lot with those situations and lots of others. And what it's called radical acceptance. And so this whole idea comes from reality is what it is, right? There's lots of things that we might wish were different. We might have imagined being different, but the reality is that they're not, right? I imagined when I got a puppy that I would have, a playmate for my other dog, and we would go on walks and we would do all these things, and that's not what I got. And radical acceptance basically tells us that fighting against the reality that we're in, trying to make it different, really just makes us more miserable. Accepting something does not necessarily mean I approve of it and I like it, right? Would I rather that my dog did not have anxiety? Absolutely. Does not accepting that that's the reality do me any good? No. And I think when I was able to accept, like, this is the dog that I have, and this is the reality of what that looks like, I was kind of able to let go of hoping he was different and seeing every negative as, oh, it's another thing. It's another thing that's not right. And trying to, I remember especially kind of early on with us, when we had to separate him and our other dog. And I think my partner and I both struggled with trying to, well, but we used to be able to do this. And it used to be like this. And why can't it be like that again? And when we accepted that it's not like that, and maybe it can be again someday, but right now the reality is, I've got baby gates, and have to make sure that one dog is away before the other one comes out, and all that's just the reality. And when I accepted that that was the reality, I was able to let go of a lot of what ifs and sadness and resentment and anger, and work towards finding a solution.
So does that look like then, like, for example, when I got Rowan, I was hoping for an adventure buddy, but he's actually more of a couch potato, so for me, and he does have like anxiety surrounding different things. And so for me, that's accepting that that's not going to be the case. And then maybe asking myself, well, what can he do? And then try to build skills around that. Is that kind of what you're thinking, or am I missing the point?
No, that's absolutely it. Right. So no matter how much training I do with Finn, he's never going to be a dog that I bring to a cafe.
Yes.
It's not going to happen. He would be miserable. I might be able to train him to like tolerate it, but he would not be happy.
Yeah.
And, I think sometimes accepting, I don't have an adventure buddy, I have a couch potato. So what can I still accepting that instead of saying, I don't like this, how do I fix it? Allows you to appreciate having a couch potato that you can sit and watch a movie with, right? Like, whereas if you didn't accept that that was the case, you might be fighting against that.
Right.
My favorite kind of analogy or example of radical acceptance that I always give people. So I currently live in South Carolina, but I grew up in Buffalo, New York. Okay. There's a lot of snow in Buffalo. I hate the snow. Hate it. I live in South Carolina now for a reason. But when I was in Buffalo, whether I liked the snow or not, if I had said, well, I don't like it, I want it to be different, and so I refuse to accept that there's snow, I'm going to make myself miserable by doing that, right? I'm never going to be happy. I'm going to miss everything else. I'm going to be so frustrated that there's snow. Or at the even further extreme, I refuse to accept it's snowing. I don't like winter coats and boots and gloves, so I'm not wearing these things. Well, now I'm angry that it's snowing and I'm really cold. Accepting, I live in Buffalo, it snows. I don't like it. Too bad. Right? Can't change it. Gonna have to deal with it. It doesn't convince me to love it. I'm not excited about it. But I've got my boots on and my coat on and my gloves, and I'm shoveling the snow out of my driveway so I can get my car out. And I think, then I'm able to enjoy the other parts of my life. And I think we have to do that with our dogs. I think sometimes we have to do that with people. Right? I cannot convince my family member, friend, whatever. I may not be able to change their opinion. And I can accept that that's just the reality. And work to find peace with that. And I think that can eliminate a lot of resentment and frustration, both with our dogs and with other people in our lives.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Do you have any other last minute tips or strategies or words of encouragement or whatever before we wrap up for today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that is so important, and I think we've kind of touched on it, is, finding support. So friends, family, loved ones may or may not understand it, may or may not get it. They may or may not be supportive, but you have to find some somewhere. Whether that's through a Facebook group of people dealing with the same thing, where you can go there and hear similar experiences and people who get it. Finding a therapist, finding randomly, I have a friend who has very similar dog situation all around, that we randomly met on TikTok. Whatever, find your people, right? And I think that is so important. And I think the other piece is being patient and understanding and compassionate, all those things that we try to do for our dogs, to do that for yourself.
Be kind to yourself, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, knowing that sometimes you might be sad, sometimes you might be lonely, sometimes you might be anxious, and that's all okay. And, you know, giving yourself the same grace that you are giving your dog for, you know.
Yeah. And I think if you have somebody to talk things through with, like you're saying, that's really great to examine those feelings and really get curious about them. You know, I'm feeling so angry right now. You know, why is this hitting now? Like, did you miss an opportunity? Did this, and you know, and just really dig into those feelings. You know, sometimes you do have to put those feelings on the back burner, but not forever. You know, make sure you pick up your feelings and examine them and talk through them with somebody, because squashing them all the time is not going to be healthy for you.
I always say that, you know, it's not necessarily like socially acceptable to be walking through the grocery store sobbing, but if you put that in the box and shove it on the shelf and never come back to it, like eventually it's going to find a way to come out. You know, and so you kind of need both skills, right? You need to be able to know when to set it aside and also know when to take it out and examine it and learn how to cope with it and deal with it.
Right. That's great.
About,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, talking about, I'm just getting my dogs behind me. Facebook groups, my group is a good supportive one, so Separation Anxiety Decoded. There's, what I love about it is because everyone's going through the same thing, that, you know, if somebody posts this is like, I'm struggling with this, you know, there's a lot of support, and, you know, people understand. There's none of that judgment we talked about at the beginning.
Oh yeah, the internet is, you know, it's an amazing thing. Like I can't imagine doing this before that without being able to connect and learn and have other people who, it doesn't matter where they are, right? I've connected with people in, you know, other countries, and it's really amazing how much, you know, information and support, and of course also, you know, negativity and snarkiness and drama is also thrives in social media. But, you know, if you can find the groups that are supportive, where people understand, it can be a really wonderful place to kind of expand that circle so that you don't feel so alone. Because ultimately feeling alone is, you know, the biggest struggle with stuff like this.
So what were you going to say, Stacey, about
well, I was just going to ask Eva, if people really wanted to reach out to you to get some additional support, is that something you are open to, and what would be the best way for people to reach out to you?
So, you know, I'm definitely open to, if people need, you know, additional support, if they're looking for, there was a comment again in some Facebook group, I don't even remember where it was, where someone mentioned that they tried to see a therapist about some of their stress and their struggles with their dog, and basically got those same really unhelpful answers.
Oh no.
Which made me so sad. I was like, we're not all like that, I swear. You know, and so I think sometimes it does make people feel better, like, oh, this is someone who has gone through this and understands. So, you know, all that being said, I see people individually. It's all through Zoom. So, you know, anywhere in the United States I can see. I can't see outside of, and I work through a company called Century Health, which typically does not do people typically access the services in a very specific way, through like an employer and all that, but we can kind of see people privately and individually as well. And so, you know, I can definitely, you know, give you kind of my email, and people can send me an email if they have questions about doing something like that, or, you know,
Okay.
kind of want to
Yeah,
know
we could put that
more
in the show
options.
notes. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I'm always open to, you know, talking to people, whether it's, you know, sometimes people just need, you know, once in a while to kind of have
Mhm.
somebody to touch base with, and that's totally okay. Or, you know, more often, it doesn't really matter. So
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate
Pretty
it.
good. Thank you. Yeah.
Fabulous.
I love the wagging tail in the background.
Oh,
That's all I
yes.
can see. It just makes me happy.
He's got the best tail.
Oh, neither of mine have tails.
Oh,
They both have little like nub tails, which I think are also very cute. But
no,
you know,
I like a
it
big
makes
tail.
Yeah, not quite as expressive if it's a
no, it's not. It's. I was looking like all the dog, you know, learn dog body language things, and I'm like, okay, except the tail doesn't. I can't. There isn't.
It doesn't apply. Yeah.
It doesn't apply.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Eva, and thank you for listening to another exciting episode of Tales from the Doghouse Separation, as I explained. Signing off from Big Bertha, myself, and Mr. Big. Little rat bags. No, I love them.
Bye. Thanks for joining us on this.
Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful. I appreciate it.
Alrighty.
Bye.
Bye.